Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Writers Chat. We're so glad that you're with us this morning. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm here with my co-host Melissa Stroh, and we have a wonderful guest with us. Very excited to dive into plotting. Melissa, I'm going to let you introduce Crystal.
Oh, you bet. It's a privilege, real treat to get to introduce Crystal Caudill to you guys today. I had the privilege of meeting her first back in 2020 at the virtual Christian Kentucky Writers Conference. It was the first time they had done that, and they made it so very affordable for everyone to attend, and it was just an awesome time. And I really enjoyed Crystal's class and presentation there, and we just kind of got to connect there and afterwards, and open rooms that they made available to all of the attendees. And just, it's been fun getting to know her and following her. For those who don't know Crystal Caudill, she is an award-winning author of dangerously good historical romance, which I love. And she is a stay-at-home mom and caregiver. When not writing, Crystal can be found hanging with her family, drinking hot tea, or reading at home outside her her home in Cincinnati, Ohio. And you can find out more about her at crystalcaudill.com, and we'll share that link in the chat. Today, she's going to be sharing with us about Plotting 101, and we're pretty excited about that, especially from the perspective of those of us who are lean, maybe a little pantser or planter. So I will leave it to you to take it away, Crystal.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump into sharing my screen. Let's see if I do this right.
Oh, there we go.
All right. Are you seeing just the, like, not my notes, but the slides?
Yes.
Perfect. So welcome to Plotting 101. And I kind of changed the subtitle on you, A Pantser's Perspective, because I am a bit of a pantser. I do not plot very detailed, if at all. But we're going to take a look today at what plotting is at its core and how understanding story structure helps a pantser and a plotter to create engaging stories. So I'm Crystal Caudill. She did a wonderful job of introducing me. So we are going to have several spots where I'm going to stop and take questions. So if you have a question, just jot it down and then you'll have a chance to ask it. So she introduced me, so I'm not going to go through this, but I do want to say one thing. I want to encourage you. You are not alone on this writing journey. God has called you to this journey for a purpose, and your journey is not going to look like anyone else's because God loves you so much that he's created that unique journey for you. So don't get frustrated on this journey. Just lean into God. So I'm actually going to do a quick moment of prayer, if that's okay, and then we'll hop to it. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to come before you and learn to become better writers. Help me to speak clearly and not too fast, and to just that everyone will be able to walk away with something. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So everywhere you go, writers ask each other the question, are you a plotter or are you a pantser or are you somewhere in between? So for those who are unfamiliar, a plotter is somebody who plans out what's going to happen in the story before they sit down to write. And a pantser is one who tends to just sit down and write without having that plan in place beforehand. They might have a general idea or they might have no idea. There's a big spectrum on that. But let's be fair, both ways create amazing stories. So I'm not here to tell you that one way is better than another. However, I am a bit of a troublemaker, and I'm going to say something controversial. We're all plotters. Go ahead, gasp, shake your head, throw tomatoes at me if you must, but hear me out. Plotting at its core is just understanding and applying story structure. Some people apply that structure before they write, and some people do it as they're writing or even go back and check their writing and apply it afterwards to make sure everything lines up. So we're all plotters because we're all storytellers, and all storytellers use story structure. And that's what we're going to spend the majority of our time learning about and understanding is story structure and how to apply it, no matter where you fall on that spectrum. Because we don't have time to do the interactive portion, but this is on a replay, I am going to do the interactive slides you'll see and understand in a minute, but I'm just going to barrel through those. If you're watching the replay, hit pause for the amount of time I say and do the activity. But let's dive in. So story structure is simply how you organize your story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end with doorways between each section. This is traditionally called the 3-act structure, and the beginning and the end are your shortest sections of the story. They each take up about 25% of your word count for each. And this means that 50% of your story is considered the middle. And the middle is one of the most important parts to develop well. So no matter how amazing your ending, if your reader gets bored with that middle section, they're not going to get to that ending. So that's why the middle can be one of the hardest parts to write. Not only is it the longest, it's also usually the most complicated. So if you want to be traditionally published or be a successful indie author, you've got to make this section as strong, if not stronger than your middle and your end. And that's why I favor the 4-act structure. And the 4-act structure, honestly, is just the 3-act structure with the middle split into 2 parts. But that's what I love about using the 4-act story structure, because it does break that middle down into manageable chunks. The basic elements of a 4-act structure are the first act, which is your beginning, and it ends with a point of no return being that kind of doorway into your middle. Then you have the first half of the middle, which culminates in a man in the mirror moment. And then the second half of your middle, which culminates in your black moment. And that brings you into your end, where you have the battle and the victory and the happily ever after. So you want to make sure you're working your way towards that. The purpose of Act 1, or the beginning, is to establish tone, genre, and expectations for what the rest of the story will be about. Certain genres have certain expectations. So, for example, romance novels expect your story to have the hero and heroine meet very early on. Fantasy stories do a lot of world building in that front end. And mysteries, your readers expect for there to be a crime pretty much at the very beginning. So as you plan your beginning, whether you're doing it in your head or on paper detailed, or if you're going back after the fact, you need to go back and make sure that you are keeping those genre expectations in mind so that you're meeting those expectations. Readers should also know what your character's goal is very early in the story. Generally, a character's goal is going to fall under one of 3 categories: possession of something tangible or intangible, relief from something, revenge of something. We don't have time to dive into like character motivation and character development, but characters need to have a powerful why for their goal. Why do they do this? And it needs to be so strong that they won't give up when things get hard. And so your why is going to require stakes, and stakes are just consequences if that goal is not met. If you get the chance to do this interactive portion, I really recommend it. What you're going to do is you're going to use some M&Ms to help you create a loosely plotted story based on the 4-act structure. So the first thing you need to do is figure out your setting, and feel free to ignore the options up here and use your work in progress or story idea that you already have to walk through it. You can choose your genre or your goal, like AKA possession of, relief from, or revenge from of something. And you're going to randomly select an M&M, and that color will determine your setting. Red is an active volcano. Orange is the city of Atlantis. Green is the Smoky Mountains. Blue is the North Pole. And yellow is the distant planet of Zarba. And brown is a castle in Ireland. I tried to kind of throw in all sorts of genres in there. Next, you're going to choose your protagonist's profession. A protagonist is the main character of your story who will have a goal, face obstacles, and eventually, hopefully, win the day. So if you pull red, you're a detective. Orange is a Jedi. Green is a cowboy or cowgirl. Blue is a soldier. Yellow is a lord or lady. And brown is an innkeeper. So I have sent out this M&M plotting worksheet that you can download and fill out with that information. And so now it's your turn. I want you to take 5 minutes to choose a goal category, figure out your character's goal, why they want it, and what will happen if they don't get it. And if you have somebody around you, feel free to brainstorm and give yourself 5 minutes for that. And we're going to keep on going because this is live. So now for the fun part, plotting. In the beginning, there are 3 parts that you need to specifically plan. Oops, I went too far. There we go. Ordinary life, inciting incident, and point of no return. So we're going to use the movie Shrek to break story structure down. And it's one of my favorite movies, and it lines up very, very obviously to show the story structure. So we're going to start with ordinary life. When plotting the beginning of your story, you need to give a reader an idea of what life was like before your character went chasing their goal. You're answering the question, who are they when they walk on that page? In the movie Shrek, Shrek is an ogre who takes joy in scaring people off his land and living utterly alone. And now I want you to take 3 minutes to jot down a few ideas for your character. This doesn't have to be detailed, just a list of a few things. And I've listed a few questions on the board if you need something to get your juices going. So just go ahead and hit that pause button. Give yourself 3 minutes. Next, we have the inciting incident. And this took me a long time to understand what someone meant by an inciting incident. And I was an elementary school teacher, and I had to teach it. And it still took me a long time to figure out. So let me save you some trouble. Essentially, an inciting incident is just an event that occurs to change the course of the character's life and set them on the journey. The inciting incident can be big and decisive, like a tornado ripping through town, or small and quiet, like an old friend coming and showing up on the doorstep. Whatever it is, it has to impact the character and leave them with a choice. These impacts can be physical, relational, or psychological, and your characters are going to be left with a choice. So for Shrek, the inciting incident was when Lord Farquaad banished all the fairy tale creatures to live in Shrek Swamp. He was impacted on all 3 levels. Physically, his house was crowded. Relationally, he had people around him, and he did not like people, which leads into the psychological. He doesn't like people. He can't handle them. And so this leaves him with a choice to either live with the fairy tale creatures he despises, or to go confront Lord Farquaad and get them kicked off his land. So now it's time for you to plan your inciting incident. What is something that can happen to set your character on the journey to obtain or deliver the object from their goal? And take 3 minutes, and you just hit pause. And I just want to make a note that whether you're doing this planning before you write or while you're writing, these are all things to keep in mind and will help keep your story structure solid and will help the editing process to not be so painful, hopefully. We hope. So before we move into the third and final step of the beginning, I want to take a moment to talk about disasters. All good stories rather, include disasters for your characters at key points. Disasters are life-altering events or plot twists which change the direction of your story in unexpected ways. Your characters will almost always consider a disaster a negative event in their life, and it will leave them with a choice that will alter their life forever, no matter what decision they make. These decisions are what force your characters to grow and change in positive and negative ways. Before you hit the point of no return, your character will generally encounter a disaster. So when Shrek demands Lord Farquaad remove all the fairy tale creatures from his swamp, he finds out that Lord Farquaad actually owns the deed to the swamp. And if he wants to have the deed to that swamp and be able to kick all those people out, he has to go on Lord Farquaad's quest to save Princess Fiona from a dragon-protected castle. So if Shrek doesn't go on this quest, he's left with a choice that he'll have to forever live with these annoying fairy tale creatures, and he won't own his own swamp, which has always been his to begin with. Or if he goes, he might lose his life in the attempt to save the princess. So both choices do not look great, and he has to pick one of them. So just consider them sort of plot twists as you go along. And this leads us to our point of no return. A point of no return is a decision your character makes in response to the disaster. It's where your character's goals are clarified and the stakes are raised. Your character will make a decision and act upon it. No matter what choice your character makes, they can never return to life as it was before. So some things that you need to consider are: what choices did the character have? What choice did they make? What are the consequences of that choice? What is their new goal? What are the stakes? This is a massive plot point in your story. And if you're a pantser, what I encourage, and this is where I fall on the pantsing scale, is I generally pick out my high level points, like the point of no return and the black moment and the man in the middle moment. And I'll have a general idea of what those moments are, even if I don't know the in between. So I really encourage you to know what you're working your way towards, if you're a pantser or the traditional plotter where you plot in advance. So Shrek chooses to go and save Princess Fiona, though many of those who have gone before him have already died. So we see what his choice is, what the stakes are, and his new goal is to survive and get her back. So now go back to your character and your story. Take 5 minutes to write down the first disaster that comes to mind and what choice they make in response to that disaster. So just hit the pause button for about 5 minutes. So before we move to the middle, I want to do a quick recap and give you a chance to ask questions. So here you see a visual of the main beginning points. You have Shrek with his ordinary life, with the swamp and him keeping everyone out. And then you have your inciting incident where the fairy tale creatures are invading his house and Sleeping Beauty's been slapped on his dining room table. And then you have the point of no return where Lord Farquaad is giving him the ultimatum of, live with these fairy tale creatures forever or go off and save Princess Fiona from the dragon protected castle. So what questions do you have about creating your middle or your beginning before we go to the middle?
Does anyone have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat. You're explaining this so very well, Crystal.
I'm glad. That's
Yeah.
always the goal.
Yeah.
I always feel like I'm rambling because I'm saying way more words than I typically do in a day.
No. This is really, really good information. Anybody have any questions?
Going once?
Oh, I do.
Oh,
This is
okay.
Patrice. This is actually about the M&M thing.
Yes.
So is that just something like a brainstorming if you don't have any ideas, or do you use that as well when you already have kind of a general idea of your setting and your character? Do you still use that, or is that just a kind of,
That's
I don't
kind of
know.
just, it makes it more interactive so that you can, if you have no ideas walking into it, it gives you something to work with. And I've
Okay.
had people walk out with ideas being like, oh, I really want to write this. And in other instances, when I've been able to teach it where we actually did the brainstorming together, I've had people take what stories they already had and began plotting and developing their own story ideas that they already have. So it just depends what you need. It's there for whatever.
Okay. Thanks.
I always, like, I'm missing the part of getting to hear your all's ideas because everyone always gets so excited to share what they came up with.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I remember when I first started writing, so this was like years and years ago. It was the first novel I was actually trying to write. It was started out as a NaNoWriMo novel, and then, but I'm trying to make it something. And I'd read about Randy Ingermanson, I think, and he talks about 3 disasters and an ending, which I love that. And I love that you use the word disasters here too. So I don't know for sure. So my story is about a woman who helps a German POW escape from a prisoner of war camp here in the United States. And so my 3 disasters were she helps him escape, he dies, and then I don't remember what the third one was, but he was supposed to die in the middle of the story, even though he's the love interest. Again, this was very early on when I didn't quite understand all the rules. reader expectations. I wanted him gone. Anyway, so I'm like writing, and like we get halfway to the story, he hasn't even escaped from the prisoner war camp yet. So it's like, so you have to be flexible. If you're a real pantser, you might have to be real flexible with this. But even so, still having those markers just helps because it gives you something to write towards, even if your disaster one becomes the second disaster instead, or whatever. At least you're moving forward and you've got exciting things going on, and to help that middle not sag. So
being a pantser means you have to be very fluid. I have
yeah.
two very type A plotter details down to what senses you have in each chapter, friends who look at me and go, "You don't know what's happening in the next chapter?" I'm like, I'll figure it out when I get there.
No.
But I know I'm working towards this. And
Yeah.
so just being flexible is really helpful. And thank you for bringing up the fact that it was Randy Ingerman's word for disaster. You'll find that I use a lot of terms from a lot of different authors, and I've picked out what works for me. So if you hear a term and it's been used with a different term elsewhere, but means the same thing, use whichever one makes the most sense to you. That's part of this writing journey. As you learn, you'll take on things that make sense to you and kick out what doesn't. And I encourage you to do that. There is no one author who has all the answers, and that's the golden rule that cannot be broken. So.
I love that you said that, because I'm the same way. I have just been like a little magpie and taking this, and that. And I will say too, over time, I'm much more of a plotter now than I was at the beginning, because it does make the writing faster to put you, because you're going to do that work either at the beginning or at the end. Mm-hmm. And I have found that it's easier to do a lot of it at the beginning.
Which is why I call us all plotters, because we have to do it at some point.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when and where we do it. But yes, I have definitely slid farther away from the true sit down, don't know what I'm doing, to I know what I'm working my way toward, even if I don't know all the details.
Right.
And this is my roadmap for when I start a story. I look at what the points are and get some general ideas and brainstorm some things. And I just kind of throw them up there, and I cherry pick the ones that I actually end up wanting to use. So there's lots of ways you can use this, but having story structure as your basis is really what's going to help you create fantastic stories that readers can't put down. So, all right, then we're going to hop into the middle, the hardest place. So after we pass the point of no return, we enter the middle, and this is where we as authors enter dangerous grounds. The middle can make or break a story just as much as the beginning or end can. The middle of your story is going to be made up of a series of mini goals, obstacles, and disasters that propel your characters along their journey with increasing stakes and tension. So we've talked about disasters, and each of the main points you see labeled on this line are the decision points after a major disaster in the story. But between each of these moments and disasters are obstacles on your character's journey. Obstacles are not as life-altering as disasters, but they are challenges which grow the stakes and equip your protagonist with the skills, knowledge, and connections which will support them in the disasters and the big finale at the end. When developing your obstacles, consider what mini goals your characters need to achieve in order to reach their main goal. It's like anytime you have a really big project, you break it down to smaller steps. You need to do that for your story as well. And then you're going to create expected and unexpected obstacles to those mini goals. And that's really important. You want the expected ones and especially the unexpected. Give yourself a good mix. Every obstacle they face needs to force your character to make a decision that will move them closer to or farther from their goal. There also needs to be a mixture of victories and failures, because no reader wants to see a protagonist that always wins. Readers love rooting for the underdog. And in lots of ways, your character needs to be that underdog all the way to the very end until they finally reach their full victory. Even in their victories, what they want will remain out of reach until they have their happily ever after. So I'm not saying they should always lose, but I'm saying even in those victories, they haven't achieved what they want yet. So in the first half of the middle of Shrek, He has two mini goals. The first is to rescue Princess Fiona from the dragon's castle, and the other goal is to get her back to Lord Farquaad. So the first set of obstacles he met with that mini goal was he had to cross a bridge that was over lava. He had to find Fiona, who is in the tallest tower, and he had to overcome the dragon who was protecting her. So his new goal after rescuing her was to return her safely to Lord Farquaad. And it was still sort of that original goal, but now that's the main focus. However, once she realizes that he is not her Prince Charming and they are not going to kiss, not that she wants to kiss an ogre, he has to get this very defiant princess to go with him. So if you're doing the M&M activity, I want you to look back at your character's goal, consider what mini goals they need to reach that big goal, come up with at least 2 obstacles your character could face in reaching those mini goals. And you don't have to know how they're going to overcome it or even know if they're going to succeed or fail. So you're going to take 5 minutes to do that. So pause it. Now that you've got your obstacles picked out, pick 2 M&M colors and write them down, 1 color beside each obstacle. If the M&M is blue, brown, or green, your character was successful against the obstacle. If it is red, orange, or yellow, they have failed. So now you need to take another 5 minutes and determine the consequences or gains for each of these obstacles. And so now you see why we don't have time to do this in the non-recorded version. It takes time to plot things, but I promise you, you're going to do it at some point in this process. And so where you do it is up to you, but we're all plotters. So the man in the mirror moment is a moment of self-reflection and truth for your character. It happens almost exactly in the middle of your story. And this concept of the man in the mirror moment was developed by James Scott Bell in his book, Write Your Novel from the Middle. And I highly recommend it. It's a real quick read. It's real thin, but it's really got some great information there for you. But what happened is Mr. Bell noticed that pretty much in the middle of every movie or novel, there is this moment where the main character has a good look at themselves or the odds against them. They discover a truth and they then decide how to proceed. He dubbed this moment the man in the mirror moment. So I have personally noticed that this moment usually comes in the middle of or just after a disaster. And as a response to that disaster, they have this man in the mirror moment. They discover a truth that they had not previously seen. There are 2 different ways the character can look at this moment. In a character-driven story, characters take a look at themselves and are confronted with the truth that they may or may not like. They kind of reach this point where they want to be different, and what worked for them in the past isn't working anymore. They ask questions like, who am I? What have I become? If I continue this way through the rest of Act 2, will I be any different? What do I need to do to change to become a better version of myself and reach my goal? The other way a character can face a man in the mirror moment is more plot driven. Characters evaluate the odds against them in achieving their goal. And at this point, that forces them to, I'm talking so much. At this point, the forces against them seem so vast that there is virtually no way to go on without facing certain death. And whether that character whether that man in the mirror moment is character driven or plot driven, it is the point of death for something in the story. It can be a physical death, a professional death, or a psychological death. Maybe it's the death of a lie they believed, the potential end of a career, or maybe they face the potential physical death of themselves or someone they love. They reevaluate their values and the lies they believe and come through the other side with a better understanding of themselves and their situation. This is the point where their goals change or the motivation for their goals change, or it can even be a time of recommitment to their goal. It is important to note that this is not the climax of your story. When looking at the odds against them, they are simply making a decision on whether or not they should give up or continue on their journey using a new tactic. I think, yep, one more. Okay. And these moments don't have to be huge, and they're often not. A paragraph or two as they wrestle with this information and draw new conclusions is more than enough. With Shrek, it's 3 minutes of the entire movie. His disaster was he caved and allowed them to stay overnight in the forest when Princess Fiona demanded it. Now, we know the reason on her part is she didn't want to reveal that she's cursed and turns into an ogre at night. But for Shrek, it forced him to have an evening with Donkey, who presses a conversation that reveals Shrek keeps everyone out because he believes everyone judges him before they even get to know him. Shrek admits his wound, and we see this small moment of softening as he admits that Donkey really is a friend, and probably his first friend. We don't witness him personally wrestling with these thoughts or his decision to change, but we see the results of it and his willingness to make a change. He is growing into a better person. He made a small step in that direction, and throughout the rest of the movie, he makes improvements and has setbacks to that change. And so this man in the mirror moment is kind of that pivotal moment when they make another massive decision that affects the rest of the plot. So right now, I want you to look at your character and decide what their man in the mirror moment is. Consider what's going to force them to look at themselves or the odds against them. What are they going to discover about themselves and want to change? What is their new or altered goal? Take 5 minutes. And we're going to keep going. All right, the middle part B. But a decision in response to the man in the mirror moment isn't the end. The second half of the middle is spent facing new and more difficult obstacles. The setbacks are more impactful and dangerous. The victories are all the sweeter. However, we can't reach the end without another disaster, and this disaster is going to lead us right into our character's black moment at the end of Act 2. This disaster is going to hit them in all their weaknesses. Their greatest fears are going to be confirmed, and their absolute worst thing that could possibly happen is going to happen. In the second half of Shrek, we see him continue to change and form a relationship with Fiona. So now he has 2 friends, but then disaster strikes. He overhears Fiona and Donkey talking, and he thinks that they're talking about him. He feels like he's been stabbed in the back. Instead of proposing to Fiona like he planned, he goes and gets Lord Farquaad and sends not only Fiona away, but Donkey too. So he goes back to his swamp and he tries to live his life the same way he did before, alone. His response to this disaster is his black moment. The black moment is the moment when your character faces that worst fear. All seems lost. They struggle to hope for a happy ending. They can see their goals slipping away, and so can your reader. In the black moment, you want to hit your character in all their weak spots. I cannot say that enough. You are removing all apparent hope that the reader will get there happily ever after. The essential thing about the black moment is your character is at their lowest point with no hope left. But that is not where your story ends. But before we shift into that ending section, the Act 3 section, we need to finish plotting the second half of our middle. So take 5 minutes to brainstorm your disaster and black moment. And then we're going to do a quick overview of this middle that we've just talked about. So we enter the middle through the point of no return where they've made a decision or their life is not going to be the same no matter what decision they make. And so most of the time they are either forced or they make the choice to move forward. So for Shrek, he made the choice to go after Princess Fiona. Then in all the sections leading up to that man in the mirror moment, we have obstacles and disasters. Obstacles being like the lava bridge, the dragon, and having to force Fiona to go with them. And then the big disaster of them having to stay overnight and forcing Shrek to have that man in the mirror moment where he admits he keeps people away because he's afraid of getting hurt. And that's essentially what that man in the mirror moment is. Then you move into the second half of that middle, and your obstacles and your disasters become worse. So the stakes are higher, the gains and the losses tend to be more. You're ratcheting up the tension for the reader, and you hit this final disaster where they've reached this lowest of low points, the black moment, where they feel like all hope is lost. So are there any questions about the middle?
Anyone have any questions? I love the way you've done these pictures with these charts. That is so cool. So cool.
As a former teacher, I try to hit all the visual, the hands-on, the take the notes, try to make it where whatever your learning style is, it helps.
It's great. Anybody have any questions before we continue on? A lot of conversation about Shrek in the chat.
Shrek is one of my absolute favorite movies.
And I had to confess, I've never watched it.
And I figure there's probably going to be some people who don't, and that's why I'm trying to give basically the plot. So it's been ruined for you if you've not watched it.
No, because I know the story. I mean, I've got grandkids who've watched it. You know, my family loves it. They all talk about it. So I know like these different, and it's just one of those that has become so culturally ingrained that you just hear about it. So I really kind of know the storyline, but I've just never
I really encourage writers to, whether you like the movie or not, watch it and analyze it, because it does a very good job of following very clearly story structure and the hero's journey. I might disagree with a lot of professional teachers out there. I don't believe every character's story is a hero's journey, but Shrek's story is very clear cut in how story structure is created, and whether your story is a hero's journey or not, you're going to follow this story structure.
Pretty much,
so I am not going to get into that argument with people on what's what, but story structure is foundational no matter what plot type you have.
Well, and I like that you said this one it really hits these points, because that's so important in if it's clear, because like I've taught this kind of information before too, and sometimes, you know, I'll look up like the Hunger Games, because people know that story. You know, you do want to use movies that most people are going to see, and yet it's amazing when you start like doing that research into it. Not everybody agrees where that inciting incident is, or where that middle point is, or some of the different plot points. So it's very interesting to see how the arguments different people make, and it's people who know what they're talking about, right, but they still don't all agree on where those act breaks are. So
that kind of brings up another point that I didn't make in my slides, but I do want to go ahead and make now, is story structure is a little fluid. Sometimes you're not going to be able to exactly pinpoint, well, this was this disaster and this was that disaster and this obstacle, and you're just going to have to trust your gut on some level for some things. And if you disagree with somebody about what's what, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. In fact, it's kind of interesting to read the different arguments and see why different people think different things, and then to kind of think, well, you know, what do I think? Where do I think those points are? Yeah. So, okay, that's a little rabbit trail, side trail.
The most important thing is that you know what you're doing and why.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if your readers disagree with you of what's what, but as long as you know your plot points and why you're using them, that's what's key to plotting your story, whether you're doing it ahead of time or as you're writing. And sometimes you don't find some of that stuff out until after, and that's in the editing process, which is still semi-plotting, because you have to fix the plot.
You do. Yeah, that's true. And that's where you can really fix that middle. If you see those points, that's sometimes easier to see where it's draggy a little bit, or needs to be punched up after you're all done doing it. Yeah,
sometimes after the fact is easier. Depends on who you are. I like editing.
That's right. Oh, I do too. That's my second favorite part of the whole writing process.
You can make it pretty.
Exactly. Yes. Just, it's already there. Like we all know that whole you can't edit a page, revise a page has never been written. So, it's all there. Now it's just like those final touches and getting it all smoothed out, ironed out. And
Yep.
yeah, I love that. I actually love that part of the whole process.
Cool. Anyone have any other questions? Did anything come to mind while we went on rabbit trails?
Pam said editing is like decorating a Christmas tree. I like that.
Except for I absolutely despise decorating.
Oh, well, there you go. Oh, funny.
Yeah, so now you know a weird fact about Crystal.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, now we're going to have a Christmas tree debate in the chat.
All right, well, I'm going to assume there's no more questions. And we'll keep going. So this is our Act 3, and I know it looks like a lot, but we're going to fly through all this information. So Act 3, or the end, kind of wraps up the entire story, and therefore it has a lot to accomplish in a little bit of time. If you remember, this is only 25% of your story, but there's going to be a lot that's going on because the climax is kind of that most intense point of your story. So the black moment is just that. It's a moment of time when your character has lost hope, but they don't stay there. The first plot point in the end is the choice to overcome that black moment. So the black moment is still always going to lead into that choice, and that choice is very pivotal to your end. They are not who they were when they first walked into the story. They have grown and changed into the person that God has created them to be. Because of this, they make a choice different now than they would have at the beginning of the story. You're giving this opportunity to show that your character really has changed all the way down to the core of who they are, and not just in lip service. So yeah, Shrek rejected everyone for a little while, but when Donkey confronted him, he realized he was being stupid and that he wasn't going to give up Fiona just because of some misunderstanding. That is not a decision he would have made at the beginning of the story. He decides to go after her and try and repair that relationship. He would never have tried to repair any relationships on any level at the start of the story. So there we go. We have his choice and the things you need to consider. And I hit the enter button too late, so I know it's really quick. Then you enter the final battle, and this is the exciting scene, the showdown between the biggest obstacle and the character. It's exciting, but it needs to be hard won. If the battle is too easily overcome, your reader is not going to be happy. They're going to be disappointed because that's what they're looking forward to. They're looking forward to this battle. And it doesn't have to be like swords drawn kind of battle. It can be the argument between two romantic characters that's going to drive them apart and how they overcome that. I'm not a straight romance writer, so I don't even know if that really works. But if you read romance, you can apply how you need to. I like the battles. So your character will face his fears and remember who he is now is not who he was. So he's remembering that he is now a new person. The obstacle may seem to have the upper hand for a moment, but in the end, the character overcomes and they are victorious. The final battle in Shrek is his fight to get into the wedding and then arriving too late. So Fiona is getting married to Lord Farquaad. The vows have been said, but Fiona reveals the secret curse that she turns into an ogre when the moon comes out. Shrek accepts her as an ogre, and he actually thinks that she's a very beautiful person, even though she's an ogre, which is not what a princess should be. And in the end, the dragon eats Lord Farquaad. So it's a team effort to get this final victory, but Shrek gets the girl in the end. So you get that happily ever after. And speaking of the dragon helping out, in a lot of cases in your stories, you're going to have supporting characters help them get to that final battle and victory. And that is okay. So the rest of our story is kind of wind down. We want to give our readers a glimpse of what life is like now that they're in their new life. We want to see how meeting the goal has changed their lives for the better. Shrek kisses Fiona and she turns into true love's true form, an ogre. They get married, they live happily ever after, and they live with the fairy tale creatures as their friends, the very people who started out trying to get rid of. There are so many books out there which do not have happily ever afters. As Christians, we have the gift of hope to give the world, so I encourage you to choose happy endings for your stories. Show the world that despite all the evil in it, all the bad things that happen, and the lies we're told, that there is hope and light for the darkness. That doesn't mean that you tie everything up with a pretty bow. Life is not pretty. It does still end with unsolved things or unresolved relationships, but it doesn't mean that your readers need to walk away from their story feeling hopeless. They should still walk away, even with challenges left for your characters to face, with a feeling of being encouraged and hopeful. So they don't have to be the pretty Hallmark stories that are gag me with a spoon unrealistic. They can be realistic, but you want to leave your reader with that sense of hope. So we don't have a lot of time, but take 5 or 6 minutes to jot down the main points of your final battle, victory, and happily ever after. So give yourself time to do that. And we're already here at the wrap up. So here's our quick overview of Act 3. You have your black moment where Shrek goes back to live at the swamp by himself and he realizes this is not the life that he wants to live. And then he has the choice to whether or not to believe Donkey when he says that it was a misunderstanding. And he makes the choice to go after Fiona, which leads into the final battle and victory where he breaks into the wedding and Lord Farquaad is defeated and they marry, and you end with their new life and happily ever after, married and living with the other fairy tale creatures. So how does this all tie back to Plotting 101? Story structure is the foundation for all levels of plotting. These are the things you chart out on paper or you hold in your head while you write. These are the essential tools to help you write a strong story. So if you're a pantser who's gotten stuck, figure out what plot point you're at and determine what's missing or what's the next step that you need to create. Are you needing an obstacle, a disaster, or have you reached one of these pivotal plot points like the point of no return? Are you wanting to try your hand at planning before you write? Pull out this roadmap and fill in everything you can, but don't worry if some of it doesn't develop until the writing process. So you can have the high points without knowing all of the details. How detailed and formal you are with your plotting is completely dependent on you. Honestly, there's no wrong way. But in the end, we're all plotters because we all have to figure out our story structure. So go plot your books and share your stories with the world. And so I tossed a fire hose amount of information at you. Do you have any questions?
So far, I haven't seen any, just more comments about how great it is. You really just given us so much good information.
Well, know that if you come up with some later, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I took the liberty of putting together really detailed notes. And when I say really detailed, they're like 4 or 5 pages long to help you from today's workshop. So you can find them and the PDF of the PowerPoint by scanning the QR code on, I believe it's your right. Or you can go to crystalcaudill.com/plotting101. And if you would like a free novella, which is like the kickstart to my series, Hidden Hearts of the Gilded Age, Counterfeit Truth, you can scan the other QR code on the left, and that'll lead you to sign up for my newsletter. And I always tell people, and I probably shouldn't, even if you just want the free book, you just sign up. And if you don't want to be on the newsletter, then you just unsubscribe. Just don't hit spam, please. So it's really there for you to enjoy. So real quick, I want to show and I created these images, which are also in the notes, so that you have a quick reference. So this one is just a very high point overview of what we talked about. And then we have this one, which kind of breaks down what each step is in case you forget what the definitions of each are. And I put some random obstacles in there, like 1, 2, like 2 sets of obstacles, but that doesn't mean you only have 2 obstacles. Do whatever fits for your story. This is just kind of a reference starting point. But I'm going to say that's it and stop share. And there we are, all of us together.
Great, great. Wow, Crystal, I hardly even know what to say. This was such good information. Thank you very, very, very much. It's really wonderful, and a lot of fun comments in the chat too.
Please tell me if you guys do the M&M thing and share your ideas with me, because that's like one of my favorite things, and I hate that I'm missing out on that. But I'm glad you guys get the opportunity with the replay.
Can we put the link to what the QRs go to right in the chat? Because some people didn't catch the QR codes, or they might be on a mobile device and they can't do both at the same time as while they're on Zoom.
Yeah. So, and then the one to my newsletter. That should be able to get you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Next week, we are going to have Tina Yeager back with us. We all, love having Tina. She's going to be talking about how to find support as a writer when you don't have any. So, we know writing is lonely. In fact, I'll tell a little story that my granddaughter told my daughter yesterday, and she shared with me. She's 12 and she really does like to write, or 11, and she really does like to write, and she's very imaginative. And she told my daughter, she goes, I'd like to write stories when I grow up, but I don't want to live in my room like Melise does. So it's like, yeah, I'm kind of tired of living in my room too. But that's what we do, right? We're writers, we live in our rooms. So anyway, Tina will be talking about finding support. So, I know that it can be lonely being a writer, and some people, just don't have the family support that they wish they did or could benefit from. And, so we're going to be talking about that. And then Crystal will be back with us in 2024 to talk about writing fight scenes, which I am really, really looking forward to. That's going to be a lot of fun, I think. So,
and it's not just physical fight scenes; it's also the romantic variety. So,
okay, all right.
Yeah, there's a lot
Something
of
there for everyone.
Yeah, that's good point, because people think fight scenes and they're thinking the physical part.
Yeah, and the battle.
Yeah, there's a lot more to fighting than just that. Yeah.
So anyway, I really will be very glad to have you back again, because this was just fabulous, and I love your teaching style. So, I guess that's it. If you're watching the replay, we thank you. We do invite you to be here any Tuesday morning. It's 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central, 9, 8 as you go across the country. Join our Facebook group. It's Writers Chat members, and you can also check out our Facebook page, Writers Chat, and you can find all of our past episodes there, and there are a ton of them and a lot of great material to help you with your writing journey, whether you write fiction, nonfiction, poetry, what am I missing? Fantasy, anything. I think we've covered just about everything at this point. A lot of business type classes too, and there's that kind of stuff. So now I feel like I'm rambling, so I'm just going to say goodbye and stop the recording. Feel free to stay for the after party. We love to have that time together, and we'll see you all next week on Writers Chat.